and welcome to Fade In, Carnegie Screenwriters Look at the Film Industry in Pittsburgh. I'm Carrie Collins, your host. Today, I'm happy to introduce our guest, Jim Mercurio. Jim is a filmmaker and a story analyst. Jim, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Jim, here at Fade In, we love a good Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania angle. What's yours?
I don't know if there is one. I mean, I grew up in a small town, Newcastle, about an hour north of here. And, 79 Pirates World Series Game 5, I was there.
That's a good one.
I went to undergrad at University of Michigan,
okay.
so away but not too far. And then I ended up staying there for a master's degree in film, but it wasn't the kind of like most prestigious one. It wasn't the most like technically advanced. Mm-hmm. So it was a little more emphasis on like storytelling, filmmaking in general. Mm-hmm. Like I would be a TA for like genre classes and stuff. And actually, they had a class on laughing and screaming, the horror films and comedies from the 70s, gross out.
Great.
And the guy who wrote American Pie went through that program and did it.
Oh,
so
wow.
we literally like studied these movies from like a psychoanalytic kind of viewpoint.
Yeah.
So I went to Los Angeles, was there for 15 years. I was bi-coastal for a while. Now I'm going to basically. The industry's kind of changed. I'm thinking about either Los Angeles or New York. The last 5 years, I've kind of been like in my cave a little bit. I finished this kind of massive DVD set, which we'll talk about later, in this first ever book on screenwriting.
Yes.
It's about screenwriting, but scene writing, really kind of nitty gritty. So I'm finishing those up and hopefully then like kind of put like the teaching aside for a little bit. I mean, I still make my living with like a handful of like clients who I help them with the scripts. Right. But basically getting back to what everyone else is doing, writing a spec script, figuring out what I'm going to direct next. I directed a little $250,000 movie in Detroit, a horror film that's out now. It's called Last Girl.
Okay.
You can go to Google Play or go to Amazon.
Great.
It's called Last Girl. It's like a horror film, first person snuff film, friendly little.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's the thing though. As a director, it's like you may not always choose the exact project you want to work on.
Right.
It's like you have to find a way to get experience in that sandbox. Mm-hmm. So someone says, "Hey, here's $250,000 of all money to spend." Right. You'd be the director. I'm like, yes, you need to get that.
Absolutely.
And what's nice about a screenwriter is that it's just paper.
That's true.
So it's like, but some personality-wise, like, if you're an introvert, maybe it's easier to sit in a room at a computer for 3 months. I get a little restless, but like the book has literally been like one of the most challenging things for me because it's like I'm trying to take my chaos and like focus it,
channel it,
and just me in the word processor for like thousands hours. So anyway, so I'm trying to basically be like the teacher. And then get back to like, what's next as a filmmaker and screenwriter. Well,
let's talk about you as a teacher. You're also a story analyst.
Yes.
I think Creative Screenwriting magazine said that you were one of the top-ranked story analysts in the country.
Yeah, I was one of the charter subscribers for Creative Screenwriting magazine. I was columnist for 10 years. And actually, Eric Bauer, who founded Creative Screenwriting, we did the two movies together, Hard Scrambled, which is also actually getting a re-release in January, Hard Scrambled, Kurtwood Smith, from the 70s show. And I was involved with the Screenwriting Expo and that. So like I directed 40 hours or 40 DVDs of screenwriting. Mm-hmm. Richard Walter, Carl Iglesias, Michael Haig, including my two classes, Theme and Killer Endings. And then I did this kind of like massive undertaking, this 10-hour DVD set called Complete Screenwriting. Mm-hmm. And we'll get a clip in later on. I'll share a little bit about it. And it's really kind of intense. And it's like the risk-taking like mentality of me as a filmmaker is what made me do this thing. So like most of the teachers aren't going to take 2-3 years of your life and $50,000.
Right.
I'm probably never going to make my money back, but like it's back to the same reason you make movies. It's like you have a passion, you're fighting for something, you're doing something important, and there's importance. Like I want a legacy, I want to be a great teacher. Right. I want to help people it's like go big or go home. I don't want like, hey, here's some lessons and be kind of good. It's like I want to like rip your soul out and like show you how great you can be and like push you. So like that kind of idea of champion, which is my company and kind of my name, it's like that's kind of what I am. So like as a coach, I'm like part mentor, part psychoanalyst, part head NFL coach kind of thing, like pushing and kind of working with you, but also like allowing you and together like attacking weaknesses, like trying to figure out like what you're not so good at. And kind of pushing towards that, if that makes sense. So, like,
are there weaknesses that you see in every beginner script?
Yeah, it's tough to like try to make a bullet point because there's probably 100. Like, I would say the biggest challenge for people who want to start becoming screenwriters is trying to see screenwriting clearly, what it is, what it's not, and what good screenwriting is. So it's like, I'm doing a free class tomorrow, and there's no way I'm going to give everybody in 4 hours the everything end all and be all of screenwriting. What I want to do is open their eyes and say, wow, there's like 40 things I never thought about. Right. Now 20 of those, because as a filmmaker, I bring my filmmaking experience in. And I think actually, for instance, one of the ways you see clearly what filmmaking is or screenwriting is, you need to like create or have some kind of filmmaking experience. Right. So I'm not saying go back to grad school, but like do a 48-hour film project, watch the, on DVDs, the voiceover from the director of the commentary. Figure out some way to get in the head of DPs and actors. Like, so, I mean, for you, like as an actor, how does that affect you when you're like directing or being a screenwriter.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to ask you, is how your filmmaking affects your writing, because it does. You're looking at things from a different
angle. It affects my writing for sure, and also affects my teaching. As a writer, it's like, I can say there and give you lessons about exposition and having lines to say stuff. But look, if you're on a set, and a great professor like Richard Edson, who's in Do the Right Thing and Stranger in Paradise, or Kurtwood Smith on Art Scrambled, if they just won't say a line because they just don't get it or can't get it, it's visceral. It's not a lesson anymore. You're like, I failed. Like I tried to sneak one through. I was hoping to solve it this way, but it doesn't really do it. So it's like it's a fantastic way. And like another thing, as an actor, you appreciate this. Like you may have a small role on a film. So like as the screenwriter, if you don't understand how it works, you're like, well, she's just the person who plays the maid or the stewardess, and I'm being like kind of sexually dismissive, like sexist on purpose, because they dismiss it. They're like, oh, it's just a small role as the waiter. But you're in a film set, that person's real, and you know them.
Exactly.
And their family's there, and they're doing this so they can pay their insurance and have a life. And they put in 40 hours thinking about, what's this line mean? So if you take that attitude of like, everybody's important, the DP needs something to do, the actor needs something to do, not just my dialogue, not just my words, the production designer needs something to do. Like, so it's like, if you start thinking about like, I'm gonna write it visually, cinematically. I'm gonna get, everybody's gonna be happy, and it's like you have to have so many allies to get a movie made now. Producer bait, actor bait, director bait. You need to tell a story on the page. And
having said that, though, you don't want to write a shooting script, as they call it.
No, you don't. It's a thin line, because the irony is sometimes less is more. And it's like when you're wrestling with the brevity and cutting out everything that is not your script, that's actually a very creative process, because you're actually fighting to tell the story in the best way. You're like, is that the right verb? So like we sat there in a class one time, this guy was in a high concept comedy, he was turned into a penguin, he woke up and he's starting to feel that he's transforming, and then he walks over and turns on the light so he can see it, and we're like, well, he walks over and turns on the light. Walking over, the light I get, the light is like a reveal, like he needs it, we need it, surprise. Why walking? Wrestle, we don't need it. But we want an obstacle to delay the lighting, because the lighting's a surprise, and we thought, and like, she's like, why is it funny? It's not funny. Walking's not funny. No, it's funny. Why is it funny? What are you saying?
Oh, he's walking like a penguin, sure.
Waddles. Waddles funny. And like you can sit here and say, well, Jim, that's just English 101 and Strunk and White. No, it's not. It's storytelling. You found a word that was funny, that was character, that progressed things, showed what was going on.
It's very descriptive.
Exactly. So that wrestling with words becomes storytelling itself. It's not just grammar. So like my whole point is, every aspect, you don't realize, every aspect is storytelling, even your action description.
Sure. Is that something that you teach in your classes? Is that something that you try to tackle with every writer? Yeah. I mean, my approach in most of my clients is, I have a few like A-list clients who they're professionals and they're good, and I help them go from really good to great, or great to greatest, trying to do that, win Oscars and stuff like that. But for my students, people come to me, or people who are aspiring writers writing on spec, I'm kind of like, I'm more worried about their development as a writer, because that's going to solve everything. And I've talked about this before, but it's almost like therapy. Like, I want to show you, I want to make you see clearly all these 100 things that you're missing. And it can be very overwhelming, because if you're not ready to tackle it, if you get defensive, it's like, it can be very scary. And that's kind of like why the coaching process is, people commit to like, we're going to do 4 or 5 drafts, we're going to get through this. So it's like, I know you're not going away. So I can push, I can pull, or I can say, this is pretty good. This would win a contest. Yeah, you're right. The professional scripts that are getting made, is this good? You can do better. And it's like, and I try to give them basically like, I'm an intuitive person, so I'll be a counterpoint. Like, I'll give them data. Like, you have a comedy and you're inciting incidents, page 19. Not because of a rule, not because it has to be on page 10, but look at the 3 or 4 scripts in your genre. I don't know, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Wedding Crashers. They're 11, they're page 9. Why are you 19? Like, why are we having this fight? So like, trying to get them to see things clearly, be realistic about it, and then when their expectations are, yeah, I should be here, I might not know how to get there yet, but that's when everything's like exciting to me, because like we're pointing towards something. So back to your question is like, I'm very kind of rigid and intense and kind of like overwhelming in a good way when we do classes. Like, my DVD set is 10 hours of me talking at this rate. So it's 30 hours of stuff. You should rewatch it, you should take notes, you should go watch those movies again. And the idea is, analyzing a 30-second moment for 20 minutes is not going to immediately, that's not how you write. But it's kind of like, if I can open your eyes and say, wow, those are things I need to be thinking about, then it starts kind of like trickling down to like your subconscious and the way you write. So the idea is, I really am very trying to show a clear picture of what it is and show you 100 things you're not thinking about. And then on your own, you can figure out, if my way works, fine. If not,
you know where you're heading
You
for.
have
So the idea is like I'm
the
opening
tools.
people's eyes to like, this is what great screenwriting is.
You referenced a couple different movies just in this discussion. Do you find that an easy way to help people have an aha moment?
Yeah, I mean, I got to be careful because I think I'm really good at analyzing movies. It's very fun because as a filmmaker, I see as a director, I see other things, see more things. But that's the thing, like, I may show you 40 things in a scene and like, you can argue, well, only 10 of those things are for the screenwriter. And I might argue, well, guess what? I think 30 of those are for the screenwriter, and 10 of them are just for you. But guess what? It's probably like 20.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. If I show you 40 and you take 18 or 22 of them, you've just exponentially become a better screenwriter. And it's like, but once again, back to data, like I say, you have, your opening image is gonna be the auguring of all the theme.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the whole dilemma. It's gonna be your entire movie. And a thing, and then you look at 7. Light fights through the soot. It's like 5 words, it's that concise. Or in the opening of Dead Poets Society, which won an Oscar, top film and script. And sometimes, when you do theme is supposed to be subtle. You never want to be on the nose, except for maybe the opening image, only because people haven't seen the movie yet. They don't know what it's about, so it's speaking kind of an unconscious level. But the opening of Dead Poets Society, which gets changed by the director and improved upon, but the writer writes, there's Lady Liberty on one side, there's a bunch of industrialists with like faceless, like blank faces, and there's kids in between. So like conformity and no personality and Lady Liberty. Literally Lady Liberty. And I don't know what Lady Liberty looks like, but it's on the nose, but it's that concise. Yeah. Like it's won an Oscar. His job is to, in a sentence or a paragraph of 5 words, give you the whole concise. Because if you're reading along in the script and you haven't, well, that's not quite the movie yet. That's not quite the movie yet. That's not quite the movie yet. Well, then you haven't started yet. Yeah. So you start, and it's like that brevity is not a mechanical proofreading exercise. It's about the soul, the essence of what it is, or you as a creative person, like, I don't want you to write a bunch of fat stuff in your scenes and have a 130-page script with generic stuff. It's got chase scenes and some shooting. I want the stuff that's you and special. Right. I want more of that, and then condense down. So like explode out to 150 pages, and then give it its due at 112. And suddenly you have twice as much as that other script has in. Like twice as much. Yeah. Like, which means probably like a 5 times better script.
You talk about that opening scene and how that influences the climax of the movie.
Right. A key term that I use in almost all my teaching is the idea of dilemma. Everything boils down to one choice. And like in Dead Poets Society, everybody's got some kind of pressure, peer pressure. Yeah. Liberty, freedom versus like being conformist and not having personality and doing what society tells you to do. So like the idea that everything boils down to one thing, well, your climax, and what I call the killer ending, like I have a DVD called Killer Ending. And we can show a clip there if you want about dilemma and love stories.
The next issue, the next term is dilemma. A dilemma is a choice between 2 equally good things or 2 equally bad things. And this is kind of the root of all emotion in drama and movies, if you can put a person in a good dilemma. If you like this DVD, there are plenty of other people. Jeff Kitchen spent a lot of time in his classes going over dilemma, spent a lot of time on it. But the idea of a dilemma is you put a character in a choice that's 2 equally good things or 2 equally bad things. This is such a powerful tool. There's actually a movie named after the most powerful dilemma. What movie is that? Sophie's Choice. Sophie's Choice. A woman has to choose between which of her children she's going to give away. I have goosebumps just saying that. I mean, do you understand the power of that? It's like you don't need to go set up backstory. Who is she? She's a mother who happens to like her children. No. It's all right there. You absolutely, in that situation, you understand that's a hard choice, and that's really hard. It's tough. And the problem is sometimes people think, well, it's a dilemma for me, so it's a dilemma for my character. But you get in trouble because you really always have to think about making sure that this is a hard choice for my character. My rewrite of Indecent Proposal goes like this. Hey, I'll give you $1 million if I can sleep with your wife. No, thanks. Hey, I'll give you $10 million if I can sleep with your wife. No, thanks. I'll give you $15 billion if I can sleep with your wife. No, thanks. Why not? I'm Bill Gates. Well, you laugh, but the point is that dilemma, or those situations, it's not a dilemma for that character. That situation that you brought to that character doesn't resonate at all. It has nothing to do with him. And it's like the same way in your stories, it's kind of like, well, it's like there's a rhetoric to stories, there's a logic that the dilemma that comes to your character is one that makes sense for him or her. And I'll definitely go into more about that when we talk about killer endings, but you have to find the dilemma that really is a dilemma for the character and the dilemma that's right for the character.
So the idea is if everything boils down to one thing, the climax of your movie is answered because it's a choice from this side to that side. So the character who's chosen fear in running away, in not being open and being defensive, finally chooses courage and love. That's where your character arc comes from.
Yeah.
That's where your growth, that's where your theme comes. Like, you know, if you choose courage and being open, you can find true love. Or maybe in Casablanca, it's not so much love of duty or love of country or romantic love. There's a higher love. You can love all that stuff. You don't have to physically get her back and be with her and win her back.
Right.
But you know, and self-hate too, self-love. So like, there's 4 or 5 types of love that come together at the climax, and it's like, wow, there's a higher love than. And it all comes down to that choice.
It
There's a choice.
was all introduced in that first choice.
Yeah, and it's like, it all comes down to that. So one of my students was even saying to me, Jim, this is like a really sterile lesson. Like, Shakespeare didn't sit around and do this. And I don't know if I told you the story, but like, I said, let's play a little game. I want to say a word, you know, first thing that comes to your mind. I said Shakespeare. They said Hamlet. Hamlet. They said to be or not to be. How about them apples? I mean, like, you know, like to be or not to be, like that's pretty big dilemma right there. And it's like the first thing that comes to mind. Like, are you going to stand up and be, or are you not? And that's pretty much what all screenplays are.
Yeah.
Is your person going to be who they're supposed to be or not? So from a craft level, a dilemma writes half your scenes.
That has to be in there. It has to be.
Well, I mean, understanding writes half your scenes because if it's a romance story or like we're best friends, like Lethal Weapon, you have the bad side of the dilemma that you're living in and the good side that you're going to be eventually, and so do I. But if I'm a minor character, I might look at you and just see your defense mechanisms and that bad side, like, well, you're choosing fear and being dangerous. I don't like you. But the friend character, the romance character says, you kind of annoy me in this level, but I see the special part, and then you'll see it in me. So like Lethal Weapon's like a perfect example. I mean, it's like a love story. So you might think of Lethal Weapon as just kind of like this mindless action movie, but in the climax, look how important the character is. Murtaugh's daughter is kidnapped, and now he has to, and it's actually there in dialogue too, like they spell it out. He says, you have to trust me. Mel Gibson says, you have to trust me. We shoot to kill. We do it my way or she's dead. So the Murtaugh character has to say, this guy was psycho and crazy, which scares me.
Yeah.
But he's also good, and I believe him, and he's become part of my family. So like, I mean, I get goosebumps because you're talking like a character wants to live, a character wants to die, and they have to trust. You need to go on the edge and be willing to die, and I have to believe that you're really here, not just being risky, but you're actually here for love and my family, willing to live. And it's like that's a fun action adventure. You know, that's a fun buddy cop movie. So it's like. It's always like more. It's not like taking away stuff. It's like you want to have the genre stuff. You want to have fun.
Yeah.
And you want to have great characters too. There's no reason why you need to be like your characters don't want to be half of things. Luke doesn't want to be just this. He wants to use the Force. You as a writer don't want to be just action or just character or just theme. You want to do all those things. So my idea is, I go very thoroughly off in all those directions.
Yeah. With
the idea is like for you to become the complete screenwriter, you need to like tackle these things.
Yeah.
Figure out which ones you're not so good at and focus on them and make sure that you bring all these things up to the same level.
So would you say there are 5 points every screenwriter has to know, or what are the essentials?
I want to say there's a million, there's 1,000.
Sure.
And like I said, it's about seeing things for what it is. So for instance, conflict. We talk about screenwriters not having enough conflict, but if you understand dilemma at the core and say, well, that means when I'm looking at a moment, it has to be hard for the character.
Yeah.
Because if it's not hard for the character, what's the point?
It's not worth watching.
So I don't have to write a rule like, well, in romantic comedies, when they go out on the first date, they're going to talk about their past and like rehash it.
Yeah.
It's like, shut up. And I don't mean the writer. I mean, I'd rather have the character say to the other character, shut up, I don't want to go there. I'd rather not talk about this. Because just saying it like by rote is the worst possible way through. But you say, make it hard for them to say it. I don't want to talk about that. So if you want to write something that's special that's you got to make the big choices have to be yours. Concept, what's your movie about? What's the clever limitations?
Right.
Liar, liar, big. Theme, character, and then like, which is dilemma. Then on a scene level location, because like, look, the restaurant location dominates more than Jack Nicholson does, like visually in the scene. So like, but if you control those things and make sure that every one of those major choices are your choices, then surprises come out of that. They spin out of that. And then surprises spin out of that. And it's like, if you have a movie that's not generic, that everything spins out of stuff that you created, your interesting take on things, that's when you have a movie that's like your voice. It's really amazing. It's like this idea of intersection. And I know it's ironic, I talk about math and intersection, but it's like, if you can get in that good habit of like, I'm not gonna make a false step. Everything's gonna spin from what I'm good at. And I'm selfish as a teacher, I'm the same way. I don't teach about format. I don't teach about query letters. I teach about what I'm kind of good at doing because it's special. That's my voice as a teacher. And it's the same thing with the screenplay.
Right.
I don't want to have characters say, well, I got divorced then, and I think that's a laundry list.
Right.
But how are they going to react in a clever way? Like they get defensive, they run away, they walk out,
Sure.
They're mad because you haven't given me the laundry list of stuff. Like those are so much better than Well, mostly.
Just a laundry list.
Every once in a while, some screenplays are allowed to have some exposition. I've seen it before.
Yeah.
But you can't you can't aim for pretty good or okay. You've got to be like, I'm going to write the best thing I can possibly do. That, like, you know, if you're not knocking your head against the wall, frustrated with the script, you're not challenging yourself enough.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And do you tell your students that?
Yeah. Well, and that's why I do the coaching process. I mean, there's a practical reason, like, let's do back and forth as a dialogue, but it's also like, drink the Kool-Aid, come in, you're not getting away, because I want to push you. I want to challenge you. Like, you know, I'm not an abusive staff sergeant. Or, you know, I'm not like, you know, in Officer and Gentleman. You know,
Right.
I'm not that. Which, by the way, wasn't a cliche at the time. He made it become the cliche.
So when your students or when your clients come to you, do you assume they already know the rules?
It's a good question. I think I'm better at teaching the last 100 pages of the screenwriting book than I am the first 100 pages.
Interesting.
Just because, like, what I'm special at is some of the nuances stuff. So what I do is I think I'm really good at taking that principle that from improv as an actor, you know this. Like, if you're doing improv and someone says, hey, thanks for showing up with your pet elephant, you're never going to say, oh, no, it's not an elephant. It's actually a squirrel, because you don't have any clever ideas. Like, you want to stop it. It's always yes and yes, it's an elephant, but he's also undercover, so let's not talk about him, right? So with paradigms, for the most part, I'm like yes and. You know, Writer's Journey, you know, Sid Field, I mean, Richard Walter, Michael Haig, you know, his DVD that I directed on romance, I think it's one of the greatest things on stories. I say yes and. And what I try to do is, like, I try to show you, well, why are those things the way they are, and, like, why do they make sense? So it's like inciting incident. Why is inciting incident so important? Because why now? Why didn't the story happen yesterday or tomorrow? And, well, why does there have to be reluctance before Act One? Well, if they weren't reluctant to change, they could have changed yesterday. Yeah. It could be easy. Yeah. Like, once again, make it hard. It has to be dilemma. So it's like, and what's the reluctance? Reluctance to dilemma. I want to cling to this side. I want to cling to the fear. So the dilemma
yes
writes
and
like,
takes you off in some crazy direction, you say follow that to see where it goes, and maybe you need to trim half of that back, but you follow it so that you...
I push it, like, I have this idea called story density. It's like how much good stuff relative to the page count.
Okay.
And the idea is that it's back to that, you know, the 5 words from 7, light fight through the soot. He does an opening image in 5 words. But what if you take 3 paragraphs? Well, they've taken 6 times as much. The 5 words are 6 times better, at least. You know? And then, so what if every single piece of your screenplay is like that? Your action description is better. It's more clear. Your dialogue's better and funnier. Your characters are defined better, and the ones that come into conflict are defined better.
Yeah.
And it literally, like, suddenly 130-page script, tighten it up, it gets down to about like 85, and you realize, oh, I can have more story.
Yeah.
You know, that wrestling that is actually creative and storytelling that we talked about, brevity. So suddenly, like, story density-wise, your script is 30 pages shorter, but it's got twice as much good stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not twice as good script, that's actually like a 10 times better script, because, you know, like, there's a exponential thing like, wow, I love this, I want to turn the page, everything's good. You know
Screenwriter's math, I think that's called.
Absolutely. And it's like, I do have a left brain, right brain balance where, like, I want to sit and analyze it to death, so it, like, seeps into you.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about the creative process, and, like, you know, as a teacher, I'll sometimes be very intuitive and brainstorm, but it's like there's a balance, and it's the same thing. As your characters, they want to have both sides. You as a writer, both sides. And me as a teacher, it's both sides, like crazy brainstorm what ifs, but also here are the rules, here's why. You don't understand them, you know, or do you see how you think this broke the rules but it didn't? Like, showing them, once again, making them see very clearly, like, wow, there's craft going on I didn't understand.
Amateurs.
Editing's a pretty complex process. In some ways, editing, the way Eisenstein talked about it, is actually the most unique tool to film. Because film actually kind of borrows and steals from a bunch of other arts. It's got, you know, it's got acting comes from theater, it's got photography, it's got movement that comes from dance, and composition that comes from painting. You know, it has, you know, literature. It has all those other things. But editing, the idea that you put 2 shots together, one after another, is kind of montage. And like Sergei Eisenstein, you know, the great Russian filmmaker, often thought that that's why editing is the heart and soul of filmmaking. That's what filmmaking really is. And he had this idea that basically you create meaning out of the collision of images. So like A and B don't equal A and B. A plus B equals C, something completely different. So if I had a picture of Osama bin Laden and said, here's Osama bin Laden, and then now wipe that out of your mind, and if I said, here's another picture, here's George Bush, okay, those are just 2 pictures of 2 people. But what if I said, Osama bin Laden, George Bush?
all of a sudden, a whole bunch of other ideas come up. It's like a gestalt. You've now created something new by putting those two things together. And that was his idea, that it's basically the interesting stuff is when you create new meanings by putting things together. And the Russian theorist Lev Kuleshov actually had a thing called the Kuleshov effect, where basically he took an experiment where he took a blank-faced person, like a reaction shot of a person, and then intercut it with, I think it was a bowl of soup, and then a coffin, and then a small child playing. And then he asked the audience, well, what was the person thinking each time, the character in the reaction shot? And when it would cut to the soup, they would say, he was hungry, and he was obviously hungry. And then you'd cut to the coffin, they'd say, obviously he was grieving. And with the child, it was, wonder or joy, whatever it might be. But the idea is that there's meaning created in the cut itself. As a director, oftentimes, especially with inexperienced actors, oftentimes for a reaction shot, all they got to do is react. Just look. Just watch what's going on, and then the cut itself will carry the meaning. So that's something to think about when you're directing actors or actors who might be tending to overact. So once again, here's a clip about math and character orchestration, but the idea is I'm trying to ingrain it in your head, and then you can use your creativity after that.
Alice's Diner? Yeah. No, I don't do that no more. But here's what you do. Hide in the bushes outside his place, jump him, crack his kneecaps, pipe, baseball bat, don't matter. Now listen. This is the important part. You gotta this. Yeah, well, that way you don't talk to the cops. Well, don't call unless you're serious. Amateurs.
So you talked about theme, and you address that in your DVDs.
Yeah, the thing with theme is because it's always about ideas, in a way it is supposed to be about ideas, but it's never supposed to be preachy. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of a left brain logical thing you have to do with theme, and if the person does this is what they get love, and they live happily ever after. But I want to remind everybody, and I do in my classes, there's also this creative side. Mm-hmm. You need to make associations that no one else can make. Because anybody can say well, the ego is freedom, or this is bad. But if you can find surprising permutations and associating things that normally don't belong together, that's really the challenge. So there really is a right brain creative side to the theme that I always want to kind of compliment. And once again, it's finding that balance. If you kind of like what I'm saying, there's there's more of me out there to kind of get a hold of.
And how can people find you?
Well, we'll put the website up there.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great talking with you.
No, thank you.
And thank you for joining us on FadeIn, Carnegie Screenwriters Look at the Film Industry in Pittsburgh. I'm Carrie Collins, your host, and I hope you'll join me again. Bye-bye.